Welcome to another deep dive. You know, we always seem to be talking about how busy life is these days. Well, get this. Today's deep dive takes busyness to a whole other level.
I like where this is going. What have you got for us?
We're looking at Exodus chapter 5 with a study from My Christian Space called No Time for Rest. It caught my eye because it looks at busyness as a tactic almost to, distract us from worship.
Wow, that's a new spin on having a full inbox.
Right. Okay, so to set the scene, we're in Exodus chapter 5. Moses and Aaron have just told Pharaoh, let my people go. And Pharaoh's basically like, who is this God you speak of? He totally dismisses them.
Yeah, talk about a power move, right?
Totally. And get this, they even say to Pharaoh, let us go on a 3 days journey into the desert to sacrifice to the Lord. They're making it about worship right from the start.
And that's what makes this chapter so interesting. The study points out that going to the desert wasn't just about getting out of Egypt. The Hebrew word for desert, midbar, speaks to emptiness, a void. It was about making space for faith, getting away from all the distractions. That's deep.
Wow, I never thought about it like that. But I'm guessing Pharaoh isn't exactly on board with creating a worship retreat, is he?
No, not quite. He decides to make their lives even harder instead. He's all like, okay, you want to keep making bricks? Fine, but no more straw for you.
Talk about an impossible situation, right?
Right. And this is where the study connects to the parable of the sower. Remember how Jesus talks about the worries of the world choking out faith like thorns?
Oh, yeah, now I see it. Pharaoh's making it almost impossible for the Israelites to even think about anything beyond just surviving, let alone connecting with God.
Exactly. He's using those anxieties about daily life to, crowd out any space for faith. The study actually draws a parallel to Revelation 6.6, where it talks about people toiling all day just to be able to afford the bare necessities of life. It paints this picture of how busyness, especially when it's forced on us, can trap us in that survival mode.
Okay, so Pharaoh turns up the pressure, makes this impossible situation. So how did the Israelites react?
So instead of, turning to God, the Israelite foreman goes straight back to Pharaoh to complain.
Oh, no, they're missing the point. You'd think they'd be, on their knees praying, right?
You'd think so, right?
Yeah.
But no, they're focused on this lack of straw, like the material hardship. They totally miss the bigger picture.
It's like they're so stuck in that day-to-day grind that they've completely forgotten who they should be relying on.
It's a tough lesson.
Yeah.
But an important one. And the study digs into this fascinating thing about the language used here. So the original Hebrew word for what the foremen are describing isn't just like trouble, it's raw, which actually translates to evil.
Whoa, evil. Okay, that definitely changes things.
Right. It goes beyond just complaining. It suggests that anything separating us from God is positioned as this evil.
So it's not that they're complaining about the straw, it's that they're letting it pull them away from their faith.
Exactly. And it's not just the foreman either. Even Moses has a moment of doubt after this. He goes back to God. And he's like, why have you treated these people so terribly? What was the point of even sending me? You can just hear the defeat in his voice.
Oh, I can only imagine being in his sandals right then. He starts out with so much faith, and now, he's facing these impossible odds. Even his own people are doubting. It's relatable, right? How many times have we questioned God's plan when things get tough?
Totally. It's that very human struggle with faith that makes this story resonate even now, thousands of years later. Because let's face it, the tactics Pharaoh used are still alive and well today, right?
Mm-hmm.
We may not be making bricks without straw, but that pressure to produce, to be constantly on, it can be just as suffocating.
It's true. We've just traded bricks for deadlines, and straw for Wi-Fi.
Yeah, exactly. But it still creates that same feeling, doesn't it?
It totally does. So how do we escape that? I mean, it's not like we can tell our boss, sorry, Pharaoh's got me on a tight schedule when they're piling on the work.
It's not really about controlling those external pressures, right? It's more about how we react to them.
So how do we stop busyness from distracting us from worship then?
Well, that's where I think this study gets really practical. If we're always hustling and bustling, always on the go, when do we actually have time for what matters? Right?
So it's about making time, not just fitting it in, like actually making space for reflection, for prayer, for connecting with, our faith, or even just ourselves. Those things need to be just as important as anything else on our to-do list.
What I find so interesting is that we've almost been programmed to measure our worth by how much we do, how much we achieve. But if we're not careful, that can consume us, and there's no room left for anything else.
It's like that go, go, go mentality is its own form of raw, like the study was talking about, this modern day evil that pulls us away from what truly matters.
Definitely something to think about. Just being aware of it is a big step, though. When we understand how easily we get caught up in that cycle of busyness, how it can keep us from connecting with our faith, our values, even our true selves, that's when we can start to make different choices.
So how do we do that? How do we actually start putting this into practice?
It's about taking back control, wouldn't you say? Not letting those external pressures control how we live. It doesn't have to be this huge, dramatic change either. It might be as simple as taking a few minutes each day just for quiet reflection, or being more intentional about how we're spending our weekends. Maybe it's even just saying no more often to commitments that don't line up with what we value.
So it's about making space for what matters, even if it means letting go of some of that busyness that's become so normal.
Exactly. Because when it comes down to it, what good is all that doing and achieving if it costs us our well-being, our relationships, our connection to something bigger?
That's the question, isn't it? What do we want our lives to be about? And are the choices we make each day reflecting that? This deep dive into Exodus chapter 5 has been such a powerful reminder that this struggle against busyness, against those things that pull us away from what matters, it's not new. It's been going on for centuries.
Yeah.
And it means we have to be aware, to be intentional, to remind ourselves constantly about what's truly important.
I completely agree. This deep dive has been so fascinating. It's really made us think about how all that pressure, both the external pressures and our own internal struggles, can hurt our relationship with our faith. And I think the biggest takeaway for me is this. Awareness is the first step to reclaiming our time and our focus.
So if busyness really is a tactic as old as time, the question for you as you go about your day is this. How are you going to combat it? What small changes can you make in your life to create that space, that connection for yourself and for something bigger?